They say people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. What made you leave? I had a boss who would scream in my face so often, I started to strategize how I would handle it when she finally hauled off and hit me. She never did, but she did eventually lose her job after being accused of child abuse. Edit. I quit before the child abuse stuff. And I will never ever forget the day I quit. The grand boss saying, "We really value you. We are sorry to see you go." After years of working under an abusive supervisor, complete with formal complaints and documentation, that remains the most hollow thing anyone has ever said to me in a professional environment. I had been running the restaurant for weekend nights for 3 years. These were not easy shifts, 5 PM to 3 AM. Still, I was a night owl, and it was my pleasure. I took some days off and went to a hot spring with my now wife. Upon driving home I noticed my leg hurt, and within 2 hours was in the hospital for an infection that would take 3 antibiotics at once to deal with. I called in sick 3 days in advance. My AGM told me it was cool, heal up, and that they would cover my shift. They did not. For my first infraction I was put on final warning, and 1 step from being fired. After all the years of work, I put in 3 weeks notice the next day. Fuck you illegal pets. Edit. It was Boulder. Pete's isn't a bad place. I still have friends who work there. They just chew people up and spit them out when they are done with them like the rest of food service. They have enough money to, you know, not do that. But here we are. Just another burrito counter. I was laid off because of COVID, but I considered leaving because the HR manager would speak to me about others in the company. She was toxic AF and told me everyone is out for themselves and they are all snakes. She was the only person I didn't like. Probably the worst boss I ever had was at a McDonald's. We had a younger manager for the first 10 or so months I was there. Then they decided to bring in a second manager from another store. For the first week or so he was fine, until one day one of the 16-year-old girls that usually works drive-thru was put on the grill for no reason. She got grease on her shirt and the manager said she looked like a pig and to clean it or go home. She left crying. The next day another underage kid asked to just get a drink of water after a 3-hour non-stop rush. The kid looked like he was about to pass out. The manager told him no, so he said he'd drink from the sink in the back. He told him, if he did, that he would send him home. I lost my shit when I heard that. Basically told him to fuck off and left. Never went back. I heard that a month later he was fired. As a nanny it's weird when your boss is a mom with no actual experience in being a boss. The worst boss I worked for wasn't that bad when I first started working for her. Over the course of the year she kept adding more things for me to do. I wasn't just taking care of the baby, I became their maid too with no pay increase. Eventually it got even worse, and I was basically her personal assistant. She got a taste of power and completely abused it. As a young 19-year-old it was hard for me to see how bad the situation was. It wasn't an overpass thing. I was eventually fired. The day after I was fired she called me asking where I was. By that time the job was so bad. I did everything in that house. From taking care of the baby to hand washing the mom's delicates. She got me a uniform and would reprimand me if it wasn't kept well. Same with hair and makeup requirements. She was a couple weeks pregnant with baby too and was suggest I become a wet nurse for them. After I was fired I never went back. This lady flipped out and showed up at my house. I was 18 or 19 working my first job. He criticized my lipstick saying that it was an ugly color, recommending that I wore a bright red lip to go with my bright red uniform shirt. He didn't like my choice of all black shoes. He didn't like the way I mopped the floor, taking the mop from me to show me how to properly do it. He even told one of my coworkers that she couldn't wear a sports bra under her uniform. I quit a few days later. My manager hasn't been great pre-COVID, but as soon as our company was forced to shift to mostly WFH, she lost it. She demanded unpaid overtime and is of the mindset that WFH is always going to be less productive than working in office because she says she gets 1/4 of her own work done when WFH. She also volunteered our department as the pilot project to go back into the office when cases were at an all-time high, but she herself was not coming in. In addition, she has demanded higher standards and tighter deadlines amidst the pandemic, and does not support us, even when our clients are in the wrong. We have had a lot of our team members leave for better jobs recently and everyone is looking to do the same. Currently trying to leave. I'm salary. If I work any amount under 40, she docks it. If I work over 40, I get my salary pay. A few weeks ago I worked 2 days out of the week, then discovered I had been around a COVID positive person and I started developing symptoms. Work sent me home. I got a test and work had me stay home until I got the results 4 days later, negative. Even though I'm salary, my paycheck showed up hundreds of dollars less than normal and my boss didn't bother to tell me my paycheck would be significantly less. Luckily I went 2 hours, and they told her she couldn't do that. She later called me and apologized saying she didn't know she had to pay me. This, amongst many other terrible things she does, is why I'm trying to get out of there. My best friend and I worked at the same small company, under a horrific boss. Think Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada, but with early onset dementia. My friend got a great new job and gave her notice. In an effort to get her to stay, our boss offered her my job. I don't know why the fuck she thought my friend would accept. She knew we were friends. We'd even booked off the same week of holiday to travel together. Of course my friend said no, and I handed in my notice the very next week. And I'll let her know why. I mean, there were 100 reasons, but I told her that was the straw that broke the camel's back. She had no idea until then that I knew what she'd done, and the look on her face was priceless as she tried to figure out some way to deny it. I'd kill it with my efficiency scores all quarter, but when the time came for raises I was given an impossible task. When I couldn't complete it, that was the reason cited for not giving me a raise. Our company grew and became more and more profitable because the jobs were getting bigger and bigger, and a lot of us would stay late and work overtime, but hardly anyone was getting raises. If they were, it was a cost of living raise being passed off as a genuine raise. So I figured I could take my skills elsewhere and changed careers. The client let slip how much they were paying for me. In 1 month they paid more than my annual salary. I asked my boss for a pay raise and was told there was just no money available. I said I'd give them 6 weeks to find the money and she laughed at me as I wasn't the type to give ultimatums. When I handed my notice in, after securing a better offer from another company, my boss's boss offered me a 50% raise to stay. I work home care. My boss is typically the family I work for. It's always the families that are the reason I leave, never my clients. Families are the worst. The one that sticks out the most is a mom who got pissed off at me because I planned on taking a week off. I had worked for her for 5 years taking care of her very handicapped child. I don't get paid if I take time off, so I had planned accordingly. She told me that I needed to make that time up, that she had no idea what she was going to do with her child while I was gone. I was one of 3 to 4 homemaids. She had plenty of help. I told her I did not need to make any time up. I don't get paid for not being there, so it wasn't my problem, and I guess she would have to take care of her own kid. She didn't like that answer. I went on my vacation and decided I had had enough of her, so I quit. I felt bad for the kid. Wasn't a bad kid at all. Spoiled rotten because of all the issues, but otherwise a decent kid. But I could not take that mom anymore. After a week or 2 got new case, moved on with my life. But it's always the families that I hate, never the clients. I have had some of the absolute best clients. Then it's just a matter of if I'm willing to tolerate their family. When a recruiter cold called me and said, "Oh, you work at X. I'm sure we can get you at least a 10% raise somewhere else." I started looking around and got a 27% raise a month later, 5 years at the new place, and I make about 66% more than I did when I left the previous job that I was at for almost 5 years. Keep an eye on places like Glassdoor. Know what you are worth. Don't work for a discount unless there is a really good reason. I left Journeys because everyone except me came down with COVID and I was a new hire, but instead of finding people to come work and train me or shut the store down, they just said I had to do it all alone, so I left. I'm all for being thrown to the wolves if I have the knowledge to handle it, but not when I can't even do returns yet, lol. Being called into my manager's office to be coached because I missed one day of work in a 2-month time span to attend my aunt's funeral. The first thing the manager said was, I would have done the same thing. She then proceeded to have me sign paperwork instructing how to avoid absenteeism to put in my work record. That day I decided to note the heck out of there. Change the commission structure mid-month and did not update sales staff on the new goals. I missed my commission of $3,800 by $4. Was under the impression that I was $500 over my goal, so I'll let junior sales reps take sales to get them over their goals too, to qualify us for a site-wide bonus. Turns out they scrapped that too in the new structure. Lost 4 reps in a day over $6K in commissions. Company ended up sending most of the senior staff to prison on tax evasion charges soon after we left. She gave off this cheerful, friendly appearance, but over time, realized she was immature, passive-aggressive, gossipy, and condescending. It was a shame, because the workplace itself was great, but she brought the mood down, and the rest of the staff hated her. I've worked at my current job for over a year and a half. The reason I'm leaving is because I've worked my ass off for them, and the one moment I was trained for, I mean like 5+ months of training, they gave to their daughter ASAP. I also found out that I almost wasn't given my raise because the boss deemed my behavior as inappropriate, all from little things she could have corrected right on the spot, like moving a box with my hands instead of using my knees. On top of the being called out in front of all staff, being told consistently that all the workers are replaceable, passive-aggressive comments even during a simple request, letting your family members get away with things I would get in trouble for, and saying they won't go anywhere, while dwindling your work because they think you'll quit ASAP, making our last floor manager quit because they put so much stress on her. Coming in when your wife has COVID, telling employees that if you don't have symptoms, that they need to come into work, even though most customers are older people, and basically being yelled at least weekly will really make your employees hate you. It was a smallish company, less than 40 employees. My boss encouraged interdepartmental fights with others departments, and when I refused to participate, my team ghosted me. I went to the CEO indirectly a few times. Finally lost my patience, scheduled a one-on-one with the CEO, and told him he was running a shit show, and if he didn't take actions A, B, and C fast, the company would fail, but I'd be gone long before. 3 weeks later they walked me out. A year later, they walked the CEO out. Had not one boss, but 3. Each would tell me how they wanted something done, and each would tell me that the other 2 were wrong. Finally got sick of getting my ass chewed all day every day for doing what I was told. Finally caught the 3 of them together, talking with the owner. Politely interrupted and pointed out what was going on. You, 1, tell me how to do something. You, 2 and 3, 2 say it's wrong. You, 2, tell me how to do something. You, 1 and 3, 2 say it's wrong. You, 3, tell me how to do something. You, 1 and 2, 2 say it's wrong. And all of you chew my ass for it. Which of the 3 of you do I listen to? They stood there looking at each other, with the owner looking at the 3 of them. After a full minute I took off my work gloves, handed them to the owner, thanked him for employing me and quit. I heard from another employee that all 3 were later demoted, and the owner promoted other people to the positions, with better defined areas of control. *EDITED, grammar, spelling. Worked for a business for 3 years. Had a great relationship and reputation. The manager I worked with gets promoted, and a new guy is brought in. Instead of trying to learn the dynamic on the department, he was a hard ass. Immediately we did not get along. I had a trip planned for a few months. I booked the time off well in advance, and made the managers aware of the trip. Checked my schedule for the week and new guy scheduled me. I approached him, and reminded him about my trip. He basically told me that I had to work now that the schedule was posted. I was not pleased. I went on my trip. He called and asked why I wasn't at my shift. I told him that I was on my trip and wasn't available. He threatened me with a write-up. I just straight up told him that I didn't give a shit, and that's the way the cookie crumbles. A new hire didn't show up for their shift, fucking us over. They showed up 3 hours later and just stood there and didn't help us get caught up. Me and the other staffer stayed late to prep the next shift and clean. We told him to get us if he needed help and told him we were on the other side doing duties. He crashed, burned, and never came to get us. Our manager is a sexist asshole and sided with him and took our shifts away for 5 weeks before I just quit after being there for 8 years. This was the same asshole who told me I tried too hard to be a good employee and got mad at me for working off the clock because my coworker was getting annihilated, couldn't keep up, and needed the help. He threw his keys at me, punched the ice machine, and made that poor girl suffer the rest of the night. This is also the same manager who asked girls if they were wearing panties and rated their bodies. The same one who was banged from a different location for being belligerently drunk, and the same one who asked why our other manager would hire a fat girl. So yeah, great person to work for. I worked in a craft store. My boss went across the line of cashiers and smacked each of us in the back of the head while saying, "One for you, and one for you, and one for you." I assumed he was being playful, still not cool though, until he got to me. He never liked me very much. "And one for you," he said, and he smacked me so hard my glasses flew off my face. They were not loose, but they were after that day. I didn't get to quit, though. He fired me at the end of the shift. I'm a teacher. My principal was good, but the superintendent was awful. I was there for 6 years and had seen 3 different superintendents. There was constant nepotism and salary discrepancies even among teachers. Policies changed constantly and we were always asked to do more or do something differently, even if we had just changed that thing the previous year. It felt like being in a snow globe. When you thought everything had finally settled, someone would come and shake things up again, and you would feel like you were in the middle of a storm. Rinse and repeat. I'm so glad that I finally left that school district and have found my forever job in a new district. It is a low-income school with rough kids, but wonderful management and coworkers. It really makes all the difference. I was a software co-lead with 7 direct reports on a team of 20. Our manager micromanaged the budget so badly, we had to estimate development hours for our teams about 18 months in advance. We had to explain all cost overruns and underruns that deviated more than 10%. So if I estimated that my team would take 600 hours for 5 new features, and it took 530 hours, I had to write a variance report, and the reason couldn't be software implementation estimates are very difficult to do. Worst of all, if my estimate was too big for the budget, I had to revise artificially and take the overruns. Surprise, later we couldn't meet the estimate. After joining my team, we went from the least productive, always overrunning, months behind schedule, to the most productive for our project. When review time came, my raise was so paltry that our simultaneous change in health insurance benefits resulted in smaller weekly paychecks for me. That was my last straw. I left and nearly doubled my salary. I had 6 bosses in 7 months. Only one was good, but he lasted maybe 3 weeks. I also had to move my desk 4 times. Every boss, when evaluating my work, would tell me different ways to handle something. I'd change the way I did it, just to have the next boss say it's wrong, and give me a poor score on my record. 3 of those bosses had no experience in the work we did either. I was there for 27 years. In the last year they terminated all the legacy developers and had us all hired onto an offshore company. After a year, that company started paying us off and replacing us with offshore. I was slated to stay because I was higher level / manager, but my team was being lopped off and our productivity tanked. You can't ramp up knowledge in a few months or even a year. I could not stomach the environment and attitude. I left and now have less responsibility and more pay. Now the original employer wants me back. It's gonna cost them if I even entertain the idea. The company was going downhill and sales were down, so I wasn't making enough money. My GM, in a company meeting, said to everyone, "If you aren't happy here, you should find somewhere else to work." So I did. My direct boss was awesome though, and I feel for him being stuck there. I definitely left the company, not a person. Our department head was retiring and his boss, the big boss, tried to get us to work weekends by basically pulling once Bob is retired, you need to think about the future and what's going to happen with your career shit. Once I heard that gangster bullshit, I immediately started applying for other jobs. I was told I had to take a heavy piece of hand railing off of the crane and hold it over the edge of a platform while my buddy was underneath it trying to fight a bolt in it. We were about 60 feet off the ground and this thing weighed probably 100 lbs. If my hand slipped and I dropped it, it would have killed my friend and probably someone on the ground. Well, I said fuck that, kept it on the crane, and my boss proceeded to cut in on the radio channel I used to talk to the crane operator to cuss me, and I snapped. Told him to go fuck himself and get his fat little ass up here and do it himself. Got fired for insubordination. If my wife was about 6 months pregnant, I would have beat his ass when I got down to the ground. After having 2 years of incredible personal stress, multiple deaths, marriage ending, car accident, etc. 2 weeks after reeling from another unexpected passing older brother, I was pulled into a meeting and was told I'm too distracted at my desk and spending too much time at non-work related issues. Trying to explain that I'm the executor of my brother's estate was explained away to me that I shouldn't allow it to affect my work. This is also me doing the majority of my work unassisted because asking for help usually fell on deaf ears or just put in more hours, unpaid, of course. There were plenty of other issues, but this broke me. I had a different job in under a month that pays more. I'm still pissed sometimes, but that's fading. Nurse here. We were being audited by the state one time. Everyone is on edge when this happens. My boss threw yet another task at me when I was already running ragged with tasks and patients. I jokingly sighed and said, "Oi, I need a raise." She whipped around and pointed in my face and said angrily, "If you think you deserve a raise, maybe you should have been smart enough to get the right initials behind your name." I put in my notice the following day. My boss was training me for months to take on a promotion, was very hard on me and always telling me I needed to do better if I wanted that promotion. I was already doing all of the extra responsibilities as if I had already gotten the promotion for a long time, and from what other veteran coworkers said, was doing a great job. Came into work one day and a brand new guy was doing my work, and when I asked, my boss told me he decided to go with another candidate, someone with no experience and no more qualifications than me. Looking back, I think he just used me to do the work while he looked for someone else. I filed a gender discrimination suit and won. New principal came in, no experience with our type of school. She was constantly screaming at faculty. I survived a few years where she never screamed at me, but I quit because I could not mentally deal with the possibility, if I was next, the 60+ hours of work and no true weekends or holidays off. We had to support our clients 24/7, but were paid for 160 days. Now I talk to old coworkers and listen to the hell they go through. I sometimes miss my old life, but I would never want to go back to that hot mess. My dad worked for a trucking company in Michigan and drove a set route every day. Now the truck he was driving only had one drive axle in the back, not both. Now it was fine until it started to snow. Now the combination of snow and the lack of drive wheels had made my dad feel uncomfortable to drive, and it actually was unsafe. But to the owner of the company that didn't matter, because he was literally screaming at my dad to get in the truck, like in front of other employees. All that made my dad just walk away. I mean, he literally just grabbed whatever belongings he had in the truck and just went home. Didn't even bother moving the truck or turning it off. He just left.